Good morning, everybody. We will be getting started in one moment. I'm just checking something real quick on YouTube. I'm trying to see if we can get these. I'm trying to get my lives going on my YouTube channel, but for whatever reason, YouTube is not cooperating very well. The live streaming mechanism has not worked very well recently, but we may get to it in a sec. Let's see. Here we go. One moment. No, not that. No. Ouch. Okay. All right. I think we got it. All right. So we are live on Rumble. Good morning. YouTube. Good morning. X. We are on. Good morning. LinkedIn. I will check on in 1 second. We are live on Facebook. Good morning. Facebook. Be good. Yes. LinkedIn. We are just putting that on. Instagram is on. TikTok is on. Please like the live as y'all checking on. As y'all checking in on TikTok, please like the live. We're setting the standard of getting to 100K likes. As long as I go most of the time, we should get to 100K likes here on TikTok every single day. Tell me where you are checking in from. Rahuk, good morning. I appreciate you. Let me get my comment pinned over here. And we've been working on getting domain names and everything fixed over the last week and a half. I'm working on a whole lot of things. So workonyourgame.com. We finally, let me check one more time. I was just looking at it this morning. So let me check before I speak too soon. Workonyourgame.com is working the way it's supposed to. I've owned that domain name for a long time, but we were having some issues getting it to connect the way that it's supposed to with the wwws and the https and all that. So I've been talking to some people on the back ends, and we finally got things, I hope, working the way that they're supposed to. But if they don't work, then guess what we're going to do? We're going to fix that shit. So hopefully everybody's having a great morning so far. Shout yourselves out. Tell me where you are checking in from. Carlina checking in from Brazil, but checking in from Bristol, Tennessee. Carlina, are you Brazilian? Is that why your name says Brazil, or is that just your name? Bristol, Tennessee. Shout out to Bristol, Tennessee. Let's see. Over on TikTok, please like the live. Like the live on TikTok. Like the live. Our standard is 100,000 likes for every full live stream that I do. We want to get to 100,000 total. Carla, Indiana is in here. Good morning, Carla. Good to see you as usual. Joe Byron, thank you for the hearts. What else we got in here? Nikki checking in. Good morning, Nikki. Carol Ann Collins checking in from Newburgh, New York. Shout out to New York. Connecticut is in the building. Courtney, good morning. Tucker 23 Mill checking in from Kansas. Shout out to Kansas. I have actually been to Kansas, several towns in Kansas. Small towns, but several of them. Joe Byron checking in from Detroit. Good morning. Danielle teaches empathy. VA. Shout out to VA. One of my neighbors, maybe about a year ago, I saw him. I would often see him because his kid was around the same age as my kid. We'd both be walking our kids at the same time. And I saw him one day. He was moving out. He was moving back to Virginia. He's from Virginia. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Where am I from? I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am based in South Florida. So anywhere from Orlando and Tampa on down, that's all me. Technically, you may find me in Miami most of the time. Shout out to Miami. But anywhere in South Florida is all me. So anywhere in that area, you can associate me with it. Shout out to South Florida. That's where I'm at now. New Jersey is in the building. Elaine checking in from Jersey. Shout out to New Jersey. Shout out to Camden. Wifey Tips, good morning. Utah. Wendy checking in from Utah, formerly California. I was just talking to somebody who's in Utah. Who was I talking to just yesterday? Can't remember the man's name. I was just recording for his podcast. He's based in Utah. Shout out to Utah. Unk checking in from NYC. Shout out to New York. Nikki says, shine bright like a diamond. Great. Yes. Well, thank you for the gift. Texas T checking in from Dallas. Antonius. Yes. Work on your fucking game. Yes. From back in the day. Still saying it. Judah from Wisconsin. Jai checking in from Philly. Shout out to Philly, my hometown. Michigan is in the building. Jane from Minnesota. Nampa, Ohio is here. Idaho, excuse me. Nampa, Idaho. I've actually been to Nampa, Idaho, believe it or not. And anyway, the topic here today, we're going to talk about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. For those of you who know what SCOTUS stands for. SCOTUS stands for Supreme Court of Supreme Court of the United States. That's what SCOTUS stands for. And they issued everybody calls it landmark. Well, not always. Sometimes people call it a landmark ruling, but I think this is a landmark ruling. What they just issued the other day. I'm going to explain what happened, why it happened, and what I think about it, and how it applies to all of us, even if you may never end up in front of the Supreme Court. Tennessee's in the building. I see Eastern North Carolina. China H, good morning. Jennifer WWP, good morning. So here's what happened. There was a 9-0 decision issued on June 5th, which was exactly a week ago, by the U.S. Supreme Court. Those of you who don't know how the court systems work, you only end up in front of the Supreme Court after you go through all the other levels of court, and for whatever reason, you maybe didn't get the outcome you wanted, and then you can appeal to a higher court. And only if they decide that they're going to listen to what you have to say, then you can go to the higher court. So if you go to some low-level court in your town and you don't like the outcome, you can appeal to a higher level court. And if they say, okay, we'll listen to it, then you can go to them. But if they say, no, we won't listen to it, then you basically got to deal with whatever you got. So you only end up at the Supreme Court after you go through other levels of court. And the Supreme Court eventually says, we will listen to your case, and then they will issue a ruling. So this is how someone ends up in front of the Supreme Court. So what happened here is a case called Ames versus Iowa Department of Youth Services. I don't know if any of you know about this case, but let me explain to you what happened. And they ruled, Supreme Court ruled 9-0, a unanimous decision. They all agreed, all 9 judges, all 9 justices, even those who are some on the left, some on the right, they all agreed on this one right here. Here's what they agreed. Workers who belong to the so-called majority, quote unquote, groups, such as white people, heterosexuals, or males, the majority groups, you are equally protected under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And we'll get into what exactly that means. Just pay attention. You do not face a higher, this is what it means. Actually, I'm going to explain it right now. You do not face a higher burden of proof when you claim workforce discrimination. That's what the Supreme Court ruled just a week ago. That just because you are part of a majority group, if you're a white person and you claim discrimination, or you're a heterosexual person and you claim discrimination, or you're a male and you claim discrimination, you are equally protected under the Civil Rights Act and do not have a higher burden of proof to prove discrimination than somebody who is black or gay or female. They had to prove the same burden that you had to prove. Your level, your measuring stick is not higher just because you're part of a majority group. This is a very important ruling. And this one, most people didn't even notice that this happened. But this is a very important ruling that all of you need to understand, because it means, and we're going to talk a lot about what it means here today, is that this is shifting things a little bit more back to the center, is the way that I would describe it. Maybe not everybody agrees with that, but that's exactly what's happening here. And I'm going to explain why that is and how that is. So let's talk about what actually happened. So the case involved this woman named Marlene Ames. That's the reason the cases get named after the person who is filing the case. Marlene Ames. So that's why it's called Ames versus Ohio. And Marlene is a white heterosexual woman. So she almost checks all the boxes. She's a female, so she doesn't check that one. But she's white, she's heterosexual, so she's checking 2 of them. She alleged that she was passed over for a promotion in favor of a less qualified lesbian coworker. And then after that, she got, what is that?
It's Sparkle Smash.
Oh, it's a big one. So you got the big version of it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You like it?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
I'm gonna play that.
Okay. Have fun. Close that door, son. Son, close the door.
This one?
No, this one.
Oh, here it is.
Close that door. Thank you. Okay. So she was passed over for a job for her less qualified lesbian colleague. I'm assuming she had to prove that, the qualification, very slippery term. And then she got demoted and her job got given to a gay man. So she claimed she got discriminated against twice. Lower courts said, no, you don't have a case. She took this to lower courts and they all said, no, you don't have anything here. And they dismissed her case because they required, it's not that they didn't agree with her generally. What they said is that you must prove, quote unquote, background circumstances that show your employer was biased against a majority group member, something that is usually not required of minority plaintiffs. So here's what you all need to understand about the legal system. And you should have, if you didn't catch it in what I just gave you, then I'm going to explain it to you. In the legal system, is not about right or wrong. Usually, it's not about innocence or guilt, even though ostensibly that's what it's supposed to be about. What it's really about is you or your lawyer, hopefully your lawyer if you have one. They need to understand the exact technicalities and the processes of how the law is interpreted, because that's what the courts do. The court's job is to interpret the law. The cop's job is to enforce the law as they see it. Then you go to court to have an interpretation of what whoever decided, let's say it was a cop or you file a lawsuit, something like that. They interpret the law. So the better you understand the interpretations of the law, the better chances you have of winning your case. And it often comes down to very tiny details. It's not so much about the big picture thing, oh, this person's bad or this person's wrong. Like the P. Diddy case right now, a lot of people are giving their opinions based on the big picture. Oh, I was listening to Megyn Kelly yesterday. She's just going off on him. He's a terrible person. He's scum. I can't wait to see him get buried under the jail. Megyn Kelly is a former lawyer, so she shouldn't be talking like that, but she's talking more as a female and her personal feelings. That's not how law cases get decided. They don't get decided based on how you feel, at least not when it's a judge making a decision. When it's a jury, it's a different story. So that one, P. Diddy case, is a little bit different. But when judges are making a ruling, what it comes down to is the technicalities of how you argue the case. So here's what happened. Let me say it again because I want to make sure y'all catch it. The lower courts that this woman had gone to, Marlene Ames, they dismissed her case. They said you must prove background circumstances that show the employer was biased against a majority group. Now, here's why that matters. Because they don't require that if you are a minority plaintiff. In other words, if Marlene was a black, gay woman, and she went to court for the same reason that she got passed over for a less qualified candidate and demoted for her job, the court would not have required her to show that her employer was biased against her, because they are basically assuming, the lower courts will basically assume that just because you're part of this minority group of a female, black, and gay, that they just assume inherent bias against you. So you don't have to prove that the bias exists because you're part of a minority group. What this case says, what the Supreme Court is saying now, is that even though you're part of a majority group, i.e. white, male, heterosexual, you don't have to prove that there's an inherent bias against you either. All you got to prove is that there was a bias, period. You don't have a higher burden of proof. This is a big fucking deal. I hope y'all understand this. And we're going to talk about this even more as we keep going here. So you don't have to show as a majority group member that there's an inherent bias against you in order to prove bias, period. The Supreme Court, again, now this is led by an opinion. Y'all might be surprised by this. Any of you want to guess who gave the majority opinion on this? Or not a majority opinion. They all gave the same opinion. Any of you want to guess which justice on the Supreme Court led the opinions? Y'all want to guess which one? Give me some names. Alive and Wash, you might know the story. You answered it. Yeah, all y'all got it right. Ketanji Brown Jackson. This is the woman, I think she's a woman, who when she was in her hearing to get appointed to the Supreme Court, she said she didn't know what a woman was. She got asked, what is a woman? She couldn't answer the question. She's the one who writes the majority opinion. So Ketanji Brown Jackson, she rejected that distinction outright. The entire court did. She just wrote the opinion. She stated that Title VII, this is of the Civil Rights Act that basically protects people based on no bias and discrimination. It protects any individual from discrimination, regardless of their group affiliation. This is big. Let me say again what she said. Title VII protects any individual from discrimination, regardless of their group affiliation. And for you all to understand why this matters so much, over the last 10 years, we know, especially those of you who are part of any type of majority group. In other words, if you are white, or you're a male, or you're heterosexual, if you're any one of those three things, you understand that for the last 10 years, there have been a whole lot of policies, a whole lot of rules, a whole lot of just things thrown out there by people that is all based on what? That if you're part of one of these historically marginalized groups, you should somehow, some way, you deserve a little bit more, a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a handout, so to speak, just because you're part of that minority group. And the people in the majority groups, if you're heterosexual and you're having this work against you because you're not gay or you're not LGBTQ, or you're white and you're having this held against you because you're not black or brown, or you are a male and you're having this held against you because you're not a female, you're like, how the hell, what do I have to do with this? Why is this my fault? Just because I'm a man, all of a sudden they're going to give handouts to the girls. Or just because I'm white, they're going to give handouts to black people. Or just because I'm straight, they're going to give handouts to gay people. That didn't make any sense. And a lot of people have been pushing back against that. And for a while, you couldn't really push back, especially in certain bureaucratic environments. You would get fired for doing it. So, Art, New York, I see you in there. And you said, yeah, that is a win. It is a big deal. And now what the Supreme Court has said, again, led by Ketanji Brown Jackson, black woman. At least I think she's a woman. At least I think she thinks she's a woman. She said this does not protect just minority individuals. It protects all individuals. So this ruling, what it does is it dismantles this legal double standard that a lot of lower courts have been using. And the reason why this matters, let me give you context before I even tell you why it matters. This removes the legal double standard that several lower federal courts have used, making it clear that all claims of workplace discrimination must be treated equally under the law. And Justices Clarence Thomas, we know him, and Neil Gorsuch, I don't know how you pronounce his name, they concurred, emphasizing that courts should stop creating extra legal tests that are not found in the statutory text. Now, see that sentence right there? That's where you got to really know the law, and you got to have a good lawyer who can break this stuff down and argue in detail. Being a lawyer is really about arguing things in detail. It's not about the bigger, wider picture of things. This decision also sends a strong warning to employers. Efforts to promote diversity and inclusion must still operate within the bounds of equal treatment, and reverse discrimination will not be tolerated just because it comes wrapped up in DEI language. Let me say this sentence one more time, because y'all got to really understand what this means. It sends a strong warning to employers. Efforts to promote diversity and inclusion must still operate within the bounds of equal treatment, and reverse discrimination. That means discriminating against people who you claim have been doing all the discriminating. In other words, you can't discriminate against white people just because they're white, or against straight people, or against men just because of the group that they're a part of. This discrimination will not be tolerated just because you wrapped it up in some pretty language. And this is the Supreme Court saying this. Now, several reasons why this matters. One is that anything handed down by the Supreme Court, you all remember with the whole thing about the reproductive rights, quote unquote, aka abortion thing that happened a few years ago. That was a Supreme Court ruling that led to that being a big deal. Everybody was talking about it because it was a Supreme Court ruling. All you're familiar with or have heard of Brown versus the Board of Education. Brown versus the Board of Education was a Supreme Court case. That case it started in the lower courts, ended up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gave a ruling, and it set the precedent for the entire country. Same thing when it came to the abortion thing. Something like Plessy versus Ferguson. These are all things that eventually make their way to a higher level court. And when it gets to the higher level court and the Supreme Court makes a ruling, what it does is it sets a precedent for all the other courts. So once the Supreme Court makes a ruling and they say this is what it is, these are the top judges in the country. So all the other judges who are not part of the Supreme Court, they can't just blindly go against what the Supreme Court has already ruled, because what it does is it sets a precedent. And that's why it matters so much what the Supreme Court says, because in law, one of the biggest things that you do is that you take the precedent of something that has happened before that is similar to the case that you're arguing, and you say to the judge, hey, here's a similar case, and here's how the law was interpreted then. We should interpret the law the same way here. Or you will argue, well, here's how it was interpreted then. Here's why that was wrong. We should interpret it differently because this case is a little bit different, depending on what sides you're arguing for. And if you're a good lawyer, you should be able to argue both sides. So this hand down by the Supreme Court is a really big deal for anyone who's part of a quote unquote majority group, i.e. if you're heterosexual, male or white, because now in the workplace, you cannot be discriminated against just because of the group that you're a part of, and you don't have a higher burden of proof to prove that discrimination. In other words, if you're white and you get passed over for a job by a black person who is clearly not as good as you, you can say that's discrimination, and it's not people looking at you like funny because, well, you're white. How can you claim discrimination? Same way a black person can. That's what this case is saying. That now everybody's got to be treated equal in the workplace. Now, this is a workplace case. So some of you may be wondering, well, what about the rest of life? What if I'm not being discriminated against in the workplace? What if I'm retired? What if I own my own business? I don't have this issue. This can never happen to me. So what does it matter to me? This matters as well because, again, I just told you precedent. When a precedent is set, if this applies in the workplace, it can apply at home as well. It can apply in the neighborhood as well. Doesn't mean it's always going to cross over perfectly, but it sets a precedent that you can't do this and discriminate based on color. Well, why can't that apply somewhere else? And the answer is, well, there is no answer. It can apply somewhere else. That's why this is a big deal. This affirms that civil rights protect individuals, not just historically marginalized groups. That's what this says. That's what civil rights is supposed to mean. Civil rights, yes, we remember Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement was about what? it was mostly, not mostly, but pretty much about black people. All right, Martin Luther King was black. Most of his followers were black. He had supporters who were white, but the civil rights movement was about black people want to be granted civil rights. The Civil Rights Act was ostensibly created because black people were arguing we are not being treated equally amongst everybody else. We just want to be treated equally. We're not asking for anything extra, just treat us equally. The Civil Rights Act pretty much granted that. And what's happened is back then, back in the days, in the 60s, we're talking, black people were saying, again, we just want equal treatment. We're not asking for anything extra. Don't give us any handouts. Just give us equal treatment and let us do what we're going to do. All right. Don't do anything extra with us. This is the Booker T. Washington approach. And we just cast our buckets down. We'll make it happen. What's happened over the last 60 years is a bunch of black people took this concept and ran with it. And they kept pushing and pushing and pushing on the white people who had done things to appease black people and say, okay, you know what? You're right. We do have to give you equal amounts. And then it was, okay, well, now you got to give us some extra because we got to catch up. You all started with a head start. So we need a little bit of a boost to catch up. Lyndon Baines Johnson in the 1960s, he spearheaded this with a whole bunch of programs and platforms sponsored by the government that were ostensibly, again, the opinions are divided on this, and I'm sure there are amongst those of you who are in here. Ostensibly, these programs were designed. Can we get the likes up on TikTok, please? Can we get the likes up to 25,000? Likes up on TikTok to 25,000, please. That LBJ created these programs, and him through Congress created these programs ostensibly to help black people. And I will give him the benefit of the doubt. He's not allowed to defend himself. I'll give President Johnson the benefit of the doubt that I think he was trying to help black people with these programs. However, at the same time, many people assert that, and many people believe the oft attributed quote that President LBJ said, I'm going to have those N words voting Democrat for the next 60 years based on these programs. Do I believe I don't know if you can even ask me if I believe he said it. I don't know upon what basis I can even base that on. He's been dead for a long time. I think he died before I was even born. And also, the other thing is, it's possible that both were true. That he not only created the programs to help black people out, but also, I'm creating these programs to help black people out, and I'm helping the Democratic Party at the same time. Both can be true. So I think if you ask me to just come up with a yes or no answer to that question, I would say, probably both. I would say probably both. He said it, I'm going to have these N-words voting Democrat forever. And he was doing it to help black people because if it was actually helping them, then why wouldn't they vote Democrat? And lo and behold, he was right. Here we are 60 years later, black people still voting Democrat blindly. It's not that voting Democrat makes you wrong, but a lot of black people just blindly vote Democrat and they would never consider voting for the other side. So I believe that, so it started with that. So black people got civil rights. Then LBJ said, okay, we got to do something extra because black people started behind. White people have already started running the race. Black people right here at the starting line. We got to do something to equal up the race. So we got to manufacture this equality amongst black people and white people. That was a bad idea. That's a bad theory. It doesn't work. You cannot manufacture equality or equity amongst people because as soon as you put them in a position that allegedly makes things equal or equitable, you still have to leave them alone to actually do something with it. So even if I put you in a position that you didn't earn, as soon as I leave you alone, you still got to hold your position. And if you're no good and you're unqualified, you're still going to fail. So that's the reason why you cannot manufacture equity or equality. So anytime you hear a politician talking about equity or equality, you should be very afraid because whatever they're about to do is going to fail. It sounds good, it feels good, but it doesn't work. But anyway, LBJ started with this. A program like, for example, welfare was designed. It was designed ostensibly, again, depending on who you ask, there are multiple sides to this argument, ostensibly designed to give benefits to, it went to white people too, but basically people who didn't have money. And for the most part, I believe that was thought of as black people. We will give you benefits from the government. We'll pay for your food, clothing, and shelter. And then they added things in that, again, depending on who you ask. And I'm sure there's some of you in the comments who think this way, that can we get the 30,000 likes on TikTok? That one of the stipulations of welfare was that you can't have a man in the house. And this started the undermining of the black family because after slavery and before civil rights, let's just say about a 100-year period, during that 100-year period, black families were thriving. And when I say thriving, I don't mean black people became rich. What I mean by thriving is that we had intact two-parent households. In that 100-year period after slavery and before civil rights, there were a whole bunch of two-parent households. It was a very high percentage. I don't remember the number. I think it was somewhere around 80%. Somebody can fact check me in the comments. It was somewhere around 80% of households in the black community were 2-parent households, even though we didn't have civil rights, even though Jim Crow, even though the laws were not set up to favor us or even treat us equally, even though we didn't have all of these things, we still had intact houses. We still had intact households. But when those programs came around in the 1960s and started giving us incentives to to depend on the government rather than depend on ourselves, even when we didn't have shit, all of a sudden the family started falling apart. Because what happened is we started tethering ourselves to the government rather than tethering ourselves to the community. Because there were thriving black communities, even though we didn't have civil rights. There were a lot of thriving black communities where we just took care of ourselves before the government got involved. And when the government got involved, things started falling apart. And is the government partly responsible for that? Yes. Is also people are responsible, because a lot of people said, oh, the government's going to give me something for free. Okay, forget about doing what I was doing, helping myself. Let me let the government help me. And that's when things start to go to shit in the black community. That's not actually the topic here today. And that's why I was talking about that because I was bringing up civil rights. So the other thing is, people will say, this is what the critics will say of this Supreme Court ruling. What we're talking about here today is a Supreme Court ruling on discrimination that says just because you're part of a historically majority group, white, heterosexual, male, does not mean that the burden of proof for you claiming discrimination is any higher than somebody who's part of a minority group claiming discrimination, which is a big deal. What a critic will say is that this weakens the focus on systemic discrimination faced by minorities. I would say that's correct. And so what? Actually, I would say that's correct. And exactly. That's what I would say. And I'm from allegedly a historically minority or marginalized group, black people. I don't want any special privileges or special consideration because I'm black. I just want to be able to get on the same playing field as everybody else. And let's just find out who's better, who's best. And everybody's going to get what they deserve. Just to remind you all, my background is in sports. I played professional sports for almost 10 years. And in professional sports, or any level of sports, the best players win and weak players lose. That's the way it's supposed to work. And I apply that same framework to the business world, even though it's not as black and white in business. It's very far from being how sports is. But at the same time, I still apply the same framework. That's why it's called work on your game. If you have game, eventually it's going to show. And if you don't have game, that's going to show as well. So critics saying that this weakens the focus on systemic discrimination faced by minorities, I say good. Good. I don't want there to be a focus on systemic discrimination faced by minorities. Not in 2025. Maybe in 1965, that made sense. In 2025, that doesn't make sense. What systemic discrimination as a minority? Anybody listening to this, what systemic discrimination are you facing that really needs to be, what is it? I want to know what systemic discrimination. If you are LGBTQ, you're female, you're black, you are brown, you're anything other than white, what focus do we need to put on you based on that? In 2025, these excuses are no longer tolerable as far as I'm concerned. So what this does is eliminates the unfair legal burden that a majority group plaintiff had to meet just to have their cases heard, which makes perfect sense because the law is supposed to be blind. Y'all see that picture of the Lady of Justice? I don't know, what's the name of that image? Is there an actual name for that? That statue. Is there an actual name for it? I guess it's called Lady of Justice. So the Lady of Justice statue, I'll show you a picture. All of you have seen different versions of this photo. The Lady of Justice, all y'all seen this before, right? Now, one thing you should notice about this statue, the Lady of Justice, is that she has a blindfold on her face. And in any version of this statue, they all have a blindfold on their face. It's all different versions of it. So here's another one. This woman, she just has her eyes closed. This one here, she's holding the sword. She's holding it in a different hand. So there's a bunch of different versions of this same statue. And the whole point of the Lady of Justice being blind, in case any of you didn't know, that's why they say justice is blind. Or at least it's supposed to be blind. What that means is that the realities of the situation, the objective, factual realities of the situation are the only thing that a case should be based on. Not based on, well, is this person versus this person, but you're a girl and he's a boy, so we're going to weigh things more in your favor. Or you're black and they're white, so we're going to weigh things more in your favor. Or you're gay and they're straight, so we're going to weigh things more in your favor. That's not how justice is supposed to work. Justice is supposed to be blind. Let's just look at the objective reality of the situation, and we're going to judge based on what is objectively real, not adding in the feelings of how we feel about who's involved in the situation. That's where justice is starting to go wrong. And that's why the Supreme Court case matters as much as it does. O-Dog says Lady Justice, or also known as Columbia. Okay, I didn't know about Columbia. Lady Justice, I've heard. And some say this could open the door to a wave of reverse discrimination lawsuits, basically weaponized against DEI. That's what some critics say. I say, great. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. I say great. So if you are a part of a majority group, if you're a male who got discriminated against because you're a man, if you're straight and you got discriminated against because you're not gay, and if you're white, you got discriminated against because you're not a minority, I say call your lawyer. That's what I say. Call your lawyer and send them a link to this ruling from the Supreme Court and say, what can we do about this? Because here's what happened to me. I say call your lawyer. Yes, it should be a bunch of reverse discrimination lawsuits. I'm all for it. There should be a whole bunch of them. Reverse discrimination lawsuits. Why? Because when you start tipping the scales in favor of someone based on immutable characteristics, such as, or lifestyle choices, such as being gay, such as being the color that you are, or such as being a male or a female, now we no longer have a level playing field. Now you're basically giving handouts to people just because of who they are, and or you are hurting other people just because of who they are through no fault of their own. They didn't do anything. I just showed up. They just showed up. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to be harder for me just because I'm a man and she's a woman. Why? What did I do to lead to that situation? And if we're talking about the workplace, especially in the workplace, we're not talking about Barney and Friends. We're not talking about kindergarten. In the workplace, the workplace is all about how do we actually do the job and serve the customers. That's what the job is about. It's not about how do we do the job and serve the customers while at the same time giving priority to gay people or giving priority to women or giving priority to brown people. That's not what the job is. The job is who can help me do the job so I can serve the customers and make the money. Because the general idea, not the general idea, but the mandate of a business is to make money. If the business is not making money, then there's not going to be much business for long. So if we are prioritizing, let's give things to the minority groups, or let's give jobs to the minority groups. Again, this is one of my biggest challenges with diversity, equity, and inclusion when it was implemented in the workplace, is that you cannot prioritize two things at the same time. When you run a business, your number one priority is supposed to be making money. And the best way to make money when you run a business is to make sure that your business is performing at the highest possible level. And the way that you do that is by having the best possible people in every possible position doing the best job that they can do. And you can't do that while also prioritizing, well, we got to hire a certain number of black people or a certain number of women or a certain number of gay people. Because what if all the best people are all white, male, and heterosexual? If that's the case, then most of your work staff should be white, male, and heterosexual. Why? Because the priority is not let's get women or let's get brown people or let's get gays. The priority is let's perform so we can serve the customers, so we can do our actual job, which is making money. You can't prioritize two things at the same time. The word priority is based on what is most important. What is most important? Not multiple things that are most important, but a specific thing that's most important. Any of you ever been in a car before? A car has one driver's seat. You can't have two people in the driver's seat. At least not if the car is moving. I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe if you're parked somewhere. But when you're trying to do business and succeed, you got to put the best people in place. So what diversity, equity, and inclusion did, by definition, it said we got to put more people who are diverse, i.e. come from different backgrounds. We got to make it more equitable, i.e. we want more people to have similar outcomes, and inclusion, i.e. we got to get more people in here who have generally not been in here before. The problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion is that you're going against the grain of the mandate of business. The mandate of business is not to be diverse, equitable, or inclusive. The mandate of business is to make money. And the way that you make money in a performance-based world is to do the best you can for the people who give you money, i.e. your customers and your clients. Not let's be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and at the same time try to make money. When you put money in the number 2 spot, then money's going to be in the number 2 spot. And what's going to happen? You're going to lose money most of the time. You deprioritize anything, you're probably going to get worse at it. Most of you generally agree with that concept. Anything you had as your number 1 priority, if you shift it to the number 2 priority, you're probably not going to be as good at it as you used to be. By definition, this is the way it works. I told you my background is in professional sports. I stopped playing basketball professionally in 2015. I still work out every single day, but not the way that I did when I was a pro athlete. So if you put me on a basketball court today to play, you can look at me and say, okay, this guy probably at some point had some skills, or depending on your vantage point, you may say he still has some skills, depending on how much you know about basketball. But I'm not nearly as good now as I was 10 years ago. Why? Because it's not my number 1 priority anymore. So there's no way I could be as good now as I was 10 years ago, even though I probably know more about the game now, and I've seen more of the game now, and I've had years of thinking about it other than from the time that I was playing, but I can't be as good because it's not my priority. This is the way it works. Diversity, equity, and inclusion prioritized things that had nothing to do with the actual mandate of running a business. And that was my main problem with it because, again, I just told you, we're in a performance and results-based business. That's what life is. Performance and results. DEI is not about performance or results. It's about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's literally what it says. None of those three things emphasize performance. Because if you're emphasizing performance, guess what you naturally get? You get a diverse set of skills so you can perform. You get an equitable outcome between what you're putting out and what you're getting back from the marketplace, not equitable amongst the team, because that ain't the way it works. You have a sales team, they're not going to get equitable outcomes. The best salespeople get the most money. The worst salespeople get the least money. That's the way it's supposed to be. Actually, the worst salespeople usually get fired. They get replaced. That's the way it's supposed to work. And inclusion, no, we ain't including nobody. A performance culture is exclusive, by the way. I'm the one of these three things, the one that I like the least is inclusion. High performance cultures are not inclusive. They are exclusive. Let me repeat that. High performance cultures are not inclusive. They are exclusive. Can we get the 50,000 likes, please, on TikTok? Thank you for getting the likes up. Can we get the 50,000? What does that mean? Inclusive means you want to give as much opportunity as possible to as many people as possible to be involved in a thing. Exclusive means, let me give you an example. How many of you went to college? All right. Any of you who went to college, let me ask you, put this in the comments. Who were the most popular groups on campus when you were in college? Whether you were a part of them or not, you knew who the most popular groups were. Just put some names of what groups they were. Who were the most popular groups on campus when you went to college? Put it in the comments. Whoever the most popular groups were in college. Any of you went to college, tell me who they were. So I'm seeing hot chicks, the Qs, Fran says sports and cheerleaders. User says sororities. Renee says athletes. Terica says athletes. The franchise says noops. Juju says journey. What's journey? What does that mean? But as more comments come in, most of you got the answer right. The most popular, someone said African musical group. Okay. InterVarsity sports. So here's the thing. What was the question? What were the most popular groups in college? When you were in college, who were the most popular groups on campus when you were a college student? Who were they? Courtney says fraternities and sororities. Britt was asking, what's the question? And all of you got it right. The fraternities, the sororities, and the athletes. Now, why are they the most popular groups on the college campus? The reason that they're the most popular groups on campus is because not everybody can join them. They are exclusive by definition. O-Dog says football and Divine Nine frats and sororities. Yes, exactly. The athletes and the sororities and the fraternities. Why? Because they are exclusive. To be a part of that group means you are somebody because you're part of a group that not everybody can join. Everybody can't be in the fraternity. Everybody doesn't get into the sorority. Not everybody can be on the football team. That's the reason why it's valuable because of its exclusivity. Do you understand this? Inclusion lowers the value of a thing because you're bringing more people in and allowing more people to get involved. What makes something valuable is when it's exclusive. Not everybody has access. That's why it's valuable. Anything that everybody can access is not a very valuable thing. So people say things like, well, we want to create a space where everybody has a seat at the table. And I understand the concept. I understand the energy behind such a statement. The problem with everybody having a seat at the table is that table has no value because anybody can sit there. I want to be in a place where everybody can sit. Sometimes I take my son out to this public park or different public parks. And I like public parks. I like being in places that have greenery and grass and birds and squirrels and palm trees and near water. I like all of those things. The problem with taking my kid to a public park is that a public park is available to everybody. And often in a public park, especially those of you who live in cities, is a bunch of vagrants and bums who always hang out in a public park. And you can't kick them out because it's a public park. Everybody's allowed to use the park. That's the only problem I got with public parks. You get a bunch of bums and homeless people hanging around. They don't bother you, but I just don't like the fact that they're even there. But you can't kick them out because it's not a private park. It's a public park. Everybody gets a seat at the table. And that's the point. If you want to increase your value, any of you listen to this right here, the most important thing you need to do is join or become or be a part of something that's exclusive. Not everybody can get in. Your value immediately goes up just because you're in the room, just because you're in the circle. I talk about this metaphor of the stage and the audience. You know what makes a stage valuable? What makes a stage valuable is the fact that there's an audience. See, if there was no audience, it wouldn't matter that you were on the stage. If you get on the stage and there's nobody in the audience listening to you or watching you, does it matter that you're on the stage? The answer is no, it doesn't. The reason that the stage is valuable because there's a bunch of people, there's way fewer people on the stage than there is in the audience. And that's what makes the stage valuable. That's why people in the audience will sit and watch the person on the stage, because there's 1,000 people in the audience and there's 2 people on the stage. So those 2 people, their value immediately goes up because you're doing something that is exclusive. Not everybody can get on that stage. Even if they want to, not everybody can get on. Professional athletes, fraternities, sororities, people who have prestigious jobs and titles. The reason that they're prestigious is because not everybody can get the job or the title, even if they tried. The exclusivity makes it valuable. So this whole concept of inclusion, I've never been a fan of, because inclusion, again, lowers the value of things. Circulation makes value of things, generally makes the value of things go down. In some cases, it makes it go up, like money. When money is circulating, that's called a strong economy. When money stops circulating, then we got a problem. But generally speaking, inclusion lowers the value of things. Any of you who's a man, you're looking for a wife. Do you want a woman who's been inclusive when it comes to allowing men inside of her? No, you don't want a woman who's very inclusive. You want a woman who's been exclusive. Why? Because the exclusivity of her allowing anyone into her is what makes her more valuable. Is this true or not? A woman who is inclusive with her sexual behavior is less valuable just because she's allowed so many people inside. By definition. That woman I was talking to you all about a couple of days ago, the chick Bonnie Blue. There's this woman, I guess she's an OnlyFans. I don't know if she's OnlyFans. I don't know what exactly she's affiliated with. Maybe nothing. She did this event where she had sex with 1,000 men in 24 hours. 24 would be a lot. But she had sex with 1,000 men in 24 hours. And according to what I saw online, that in a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days as a matter of fact, let me find it because I was just talking about this the other day. She's about to have sex with, I think it's 2,000. She's going to up the ante. And she's going to do 2,000 men in, I think it's like 3 days from now. So, yeah, she slept with 1,000 men. Some say 12 hours, some say 24 hours. I mean, does it really matter? 24 hours. She had sex with 1,000 men. And I was just reading this, that she was going to do 2,000 men in, I think it's like June 15th. So, yeah, she's an OnlyFans performer. She's 25 years old, and she makes money filming herself having sex with. No, this is something different. But anyway, she makes money sleeping with men, and she's considering this some form of empowerment because she's having sex with all these men. She's generally a pretty girl. If you didn't know that, you would say, "All right, this girl's pretty." Generally, the problem is she's a British model, and she went viral for doing this. And I'm trying to find the thing about 2,000 men. I don't see it. 1,000 men in 12 hours. That's crazy. And allegedly she was pregnant. I don't think she's pregnant. Anyway, the point is, how valuable would it be to make that woman your wife? Knowing what you know now. If you just saw her, would you go on a date with this girl? Probably she's pretty. But now that you know what you know, how valuable is she? Not nearly as valuable. Why? Because she's been so inclusive. Do you understand? So anyway, this ruling, we're talking about the Supreme Court here today. I just went on a couple tangents. This ruling brings consistency nationwide by striking down a lower court doctrine that never existed in the actual statute. So this is the problem, and the reason why this is an issue. It's the reason why I tell you all, the United States of America, getting your way legally is about if you can afford to get your way, not if you are actually right or wrong, or you are justified, or an injustice has been done unto you. Why? Because I don't know this woman's situation, the woman who went to court, Miss Ames from Ohio, but that she went to other courts and got struck down. No. And she kept appealing up to higher and higher courts. To keep appealing to higher and higher courts, you have to actually show up in court dates. I'm assuming she had a lawyer. You had to pay your lawyer. What if you don't have the money to pay a lawyer? What do? Now your case just dies at the lower court because you don't have the money to go to the higher court. You could go to the higher court, but you don't have the money. And because she had the money, she was able to work her way up. I'm assuming maybe the lawyer was doing this pro bono. I don't know. I'm just assuming here that she was able to work her way up to the highest court of the Supreme Court. The thing is, this is what I want y'all to catch from this point that I just made. This doctrine that the lower courts had, that because you're part of a majority group, i.e. you're a white person, that this doctrine that you have a higher burden of proof than a black person would have, was never in the statute, i.e. It was never written in the fucking law, but they were enforcing it on people and basically telling you, you got a higher burden of proof just because you're white. And it was never in the law. It was never in the books in the first place. And courts were holding this against white people and men and heterosexual people for years. So the judge was just making shit up, basically, all because of this wave of DEI and this wave of marginalized groups and this wave of, oh, these people have been discriminated against. They just made something up and said, hey, if you're white or male or heterosexual, there's a higher burden of proof for you just because we said so. And it was never written into the Civil Rights Act. It was never there. Do y'all realize how crazy that is? I don't think all of you understand that how crazy that is, that they were just enforcing this and nobody was doing anything about it until June 5th of 2025, just a week ago. Just last week, this became a thing by the Supreme Court. That's crazy as far as I'm concerned. So progressive legal scholars are claiming that this undermines the moral imperative to redress historical injustices. To that, I say GTFOH. You know what that means? GTFOH. Let me read again what they said. Legal scholars are saying that this undermines the moral imperative to redress, that means to fix, historical injustices. I say GTFOH. It's not anyone's job to redress historical injustices. First of all, historical injustices have happened to everybody. Every group, everybody who's listening to this, if you go back far enough in your lineage, somebody in your lineage was held in bondage as a slave. No matter what color you are, no matter where you're from, everybody has had that happen to them. It's happened in different places in the world. The only thing unique about the United States of America when it came to bondage is that we went to war to end it. Everybody else, it just slowly went away. America is the only place where there was a war and bloodshed to end slavery. Everywhere else, slavery just slowly phased itself out. Everybody has had historical injustices done to them. So when a legal scholar, whatever that means, well, we know what it means, someone who went to school and they got a law degree, they say this undermines the moral imperative. Be very aware, be very wary when someone starts using language like this. Moral imperative. They're about to use what we call the moral high ground fallacy, i.e., I have a morally superior reason for what I think compared to your less morally superior, your morally inferior reason. Therefore, my reason wins because I think it's morally higher, has higher ground than yours does. That is a bullshit argument. All right, that's a preschool level argument, but there are grown adults who use this all the time. That there's a moral imperative to fix historical injustices, which means that we had to unbalance the scales of justice that's supposed to be blind just to help out minority groups, whether that's gay people, females, or black people, or brown people. We are supposed to do this. This is what a legal scholar says. We're supposed to do this just to try to balance things out. This is the Ibram X. Kendi approach. Ibram X. Kendi wrote a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. If you haven't read it, you should read it. I do not agree with 80% of the book, but you should read it because it was very influential on a whole lot of people's minds, including some of these legal scholars. And in the book, Ibram X. Kendi states very plainly that all past racism must be fixed with present racism, and all present racism must be fixed with future racism. He plainly states that as a theory in his book. And in case any of you didn't know, Ibram X. Kendi just took a job at Howard University. In case any of you didn't know. So any of you HBCU students, I apologize on behalf of Howard University. I didn't go to an HBCU, but I'm still apologizing on their behalf because they're making y'all look bad. They're making all HBCUs look bad by hiring him. And they gave him like a pretty high up position. I can't remember what it was. I don't even feel like looking it up. But this guy wrote the book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. He built a whole career based off this. And his theory is that any racism that happened back in the day, we got to fix it by being racist today. That is literally in his book. I'm not paraphrasing. I am paraphrasing him, but what he said was all past racism must be fixed with present racism. That is literally what he said. Look it up, read the book. I read the book twice because I couldn't believe it. So I had to read it again. The whole book. I read it twice. And again, his name's Ibram X. Kendi. Y'all can look him up. But this is what his writing hath wrought. That a bunch of people, a bunch of disciples of his nonsense are going around believing this shit. And they're going to keep believing it. They are just going to get mad when they hear people like me. They're not going to change their minds. So what this ruling does, it reinforces a core legal principle that discrimination is wrong no matter who it targets. I mean, that's what discrimination is. It's about this kind of legal discrimination is not allowing certain people into certain spaces just because of who they are. That's not okay, whether you're doing it to a gay person or to a straight person, whether you're doing it to a man or to a woman, whether you're doing it to a black person or to a white person. Again, This is objectivity is what the Supreme Court is bringing back into vogue is what they're doing here. They're bringing objectivity and rational thinking and looking at things straight up and down. They're making this popular again. This is what, and I'll say this. I don't know, maybe some of you won't agree with this, but here's what I'll say. If Trump had not won in 2024, I don't think this would have happened. I think Trump winning in 2024 plays a role in this occurring because the Supreme Court, I mean, those justices are still people. All right, they're humans. And the wave of what's going on in America right now, we're at 60,000 likes. Can we get to 65, please? The wave of what's going on in America right now is things are swinging back to let's look at things straight up and down, straight down the middle again. Let's be objective. A boy can't play in girls' sports. Let's be objective. You can't discriminate against a white person the same way you can't discriminate against a black person. Let's be objective and look at things the way we're supposed to look at things. And the Supreme Court justices, again, everybody knows their names. All right. They can be held accountable the same way anybody else can. It means not anybody can literally do anything to them, but their names are still going to go down in history for the rulings that they come to and the positions that they have. And if there's an 8-1 or a 7-2 ruling, the two who vote against, people are going to know that they voted against. And that's going to be on their name forever. Whether they ever get out the Supreme Court and live or they die out, whatever it is, they're still going to be on your name. And they don't want that on their name. And you don't go for the Supreme Court unless you're trying to build a legacy for yourself because you know everybody knows who you are. And everybody's going to know how you voted on every single thing. Do you think that doesn't matter to them? That matters. Even though they can't get voted out, it still matters because they got to live with that reputation. So I believe Trump winning has shifted a whole lot of things back to the middle. I don't think it shifted things to the right. I think things that shifted so far to the left, all is happening now is things are starting to go back to the middle, and people who are on the left are getting upset, and they're saying things are going to the right. And technically they are going to the right, but they're going back to the middle. It was so far left, and now we just got to bring it back to the middle. That's all that's changing. So some will twist this as the court being hostile to DEI initiatives, and I say, so the fuck what? That's what they're supposed to do. The court is not responsible for DEI initiatives. Now, that's not in the Constitution. DEI is not in the Constitution. DEI, for the most part, is not written into the law. And if it is, Donald Trump's getting rid of it. The court is not responsible for upholding any kind of DEI initiatives, and it should be hostile to it because that's not the DEI, again, is not some legal God-given right that you have. No. So I'm completely fine with that. So what this is doing is sending a message to employers that all hiring decision must be merit-based, not identity-based. That's what it's telling them. And the challenge with that is always going to be a gray area situation because merit is very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Merit is very subjective. Now, I can decide that this person's better than that person, and how can you legally prove that I'm wrong? You can't really. It has to be something that you can document, or has to be some level of egregiousness in order to get it in a court of law in order to get the court to go along with it, which is why whatever that happened to this woman probably had to be so egregious that it was like obvious that she could take it to court. But merit is very subjective. So an employer can still essentially do what they want to do, but they all know they can get sued, and a lot of businesses don't want to get sued because that could really hurt them financially. And some say this could lead to companies pulling back on proactive diversity efforts out of fear of legal backlash. I say that's exactly what's supposed to happen. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. If companies say we got to pull back on our DEI programs because we don't want to get legal backlash, we don't want to get taken to court, we don't want to get sued for discrimination, we don't want to have to pay lawyers, I say exactly. We don't want to have an HR headache. Exactly. So how about you stop enforcing DEI initiatives and start hiring people based on actual talent and actual skill and actual performance? What a novel idea. And let's just bring people in based on their ability to do the job. Why didn't anybody think of that before? So I have no problem with this. All that said, let's get into the conversation here. I think I can go without I've been going without the bathroom break the last couple of days, so maybe we can keep this going. So we got 51 minutes on the clock. Let's see what we got going on in the comments. And let's see what we got on Instagram. Then we get over to TikTok. Can we get the 70,000 likes TikTok before I get over there? I'm checking Instagram right now. And Soul Art, I saw you. You guessed Sotomayor. That would have been a good guess. And he said, no, Democrats are going to be pissed. Well, it happened last week. So this story kind of came and went. So people aren't talking about it a lot, but it's a big deal. Soul Art said, I wish the black men would have fought against the system that broke up the family. I wonder why they didn't, or did they? Well, there have been entire books written on that concept. You're talking about with the welfare situation. Well, when you offer an incentive to people, hey, just keep the man out of the house so you can get free money, then I'm sure there were some women who said, okay, man, you got to get out the house so I can get this free money. I can get more money for free from the government than I can get from you working. I might as well just kick you out the house. So that was part of it. And there were black men who fought back against it, just not all of them. I'm not going to say none of them. There's not like all black men said, all right, well, I'll just get out the house. Many of them did, and many of them did not. So for different reasons, but there are entire books on that concept. So Art said they will still have to prove the reverse discrimination. Yes, but now there's a legal precedent that you can actually go to court, which is a win. That's a win, that you can actually go to court and say, hey, I was discriminated against. By the way, before I get into the comments on TikTok, if you have not gotten your free copy of my book, The Third Day, The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs, you get this book for free by going to that link right there, thirddaybook.com. You'll get this book. We'll physically ship it to you. All you got to do is cover the shipping. Go to thirddaybook.com or just go to the link in my profile on TikTok. It's workonyourgame.live. I'll show that to y'all many times. Workonyourgame.live is this. If you like the live stream, here's your next move. So we literally made a page just for y'all who watch my live streams, workonyourgame.live. And this is where we tell you everything you could do next. You get on my email address, you get a little video message from me. Get on my email list. You get into our coaching programs. My YouTube link is there. The links to all my free books are there. The links to my social media stuff is there. The links to the past videos, the recordings of all these live streams are there as well. You learn more about Work on Your Game University. That's all at workonyourgame.live. That link is in my profile on TikTok. So let's see what we got here in the comments on TikTok. Shout out to my moderators on TikTok, keeping things in order over here. We're at 71,000 likes. Appreciate you all. Currently, Devo said, you think the civil rights struggle ended after 1964? You're delusional. No, that's not what I said. So you get the straw man of the day from the very beginning. Straw man of the day, currently Devo, said, if you think, or so you think, or so you're saying, or so, usually a tell for the straw man. When someone rephrases something that I said and something that I didn't say. I did not say the civil rights struggle ended. I said the civil rights movement happened in the 1960s, and there were many reasons for the things that happened then to happen then. Those same things do not still apply now in 2025, is what I actually said. Donna Lee Club said, you are so attractive. Thank you, Donna Lee. Hopefully you're a female making a comment. Nicole said, good morning. Wishing you a super blessed day. Thank you. You too, Nicole. Michael L., good morning. Drea said, so the suggestion is, straw man of the day number 2 by Drea. Let's read what Drea says. Straw man of the day number 2. Drea says, so the suggestion is black people should vote Republican. This is with a question mark on the end. So here's what happens with the straw man. Those who are not familiar, straw man is one of the most common logical fallacies. Is when people take something that you said or that they think you said or they know you didn't say, but they are disagreeing with it usually. They rephrase it into something that you didn't say, then they represent it to you either as something to ridicule or something to attack, or they present it to you as a question, as if you need to respond to it to confirm something that you said, which is not what I said. I did not say that black people should vote Republican. What I said is many black people blindly started voting Democrat in the 1960s because of these handouts from Lyndon Baines Johnson. And 60 years later, there are still many black people who still do that, and they will still vote blindly Democrat, regardless of the factors in front of them. Now, of course, in the United States, we have a binary choice between Democrats and Republicans, generally speaking. That does not mean you need to necessarily vote Democrat, but it also doesn't mean you should blindly vote Republican just because black people are Democrat, just because black people are supposed to blindly vote Democrat. It means you should think for yourself and be willing to make an independent choice, even if it goes against the grain of what you've always done or what everyone in your family has done or how you've been taught your entire life. That's the full context, but nowhere did I say that black people should vote Republican. So that's why it's a straw man. And you representing what I said as something that I didn't say is why you get the Straw Man of the Day award number 2. But Heck says, it sounds like you've been listening to Thomas Sowell. That man is all common sense. No, I didn't get any of this from Thomas Sowell, but I do read Thomas Sowell. So maybe some of it is subconsciously sprinkled into me, but I read a lot of material. So I don't know if I can attribute anything to any one person. The franchise said that is not true. Well, you should have continued and said what I got wrong. If you disagree with something that I say, folks, put it in the comment what you're disagreeing with, and then tell me what is the right thing if I'm wrong. But just saying that is not true, I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel said, this is why I say Dems are the sorry of racism, all about control through dependency. The party of racism. Oh, yeah. I understand. There's an argument for that. And there's also the opposite argument. So it's a interesting thing. Nikki, #1 gifted badge. Congrats. User said, this is America, dude. Wake TF up. All right, I am awake. What am I missing? Mariah says, have you been able to get on the same playing field off the field? Well, what do you mean by the same playing field? That's the reason why I said in sports is very black and white and is very clear. The competition is very clear. The rules are very clear and the outcomes are very clearly laid out. Business is much more tricky because business is a lot more subjective than sports. So I need to give me some more context what you're asking. Drea said, the leader of the Republican Party is not for me. What do you mean by that? Do you mean you're just not a fan, or you're saying that they are not trying to help you out? What do you mean when you say they're not for you? I could take that in more than one way. Why said a party is only as good as the people who make it up. Generally correct. Drea said, why support a party when the leader is corrupt? Well, Drea, then you could apply that to every single politician in America for the last 30 years. Which one wasn't corrupt? Name one. Name one leader, name one president we've had who there is no one who can make an argument for that person being corrupt. Name one. So we've had Clinton, then we had Bush, W. Bush, then we had Obama, then we had Trump, then we had Biden, now we got Trump again. Name one person in that group who there is no argument for that person being corrupt. Name that person. Say their name. Lisa said, when was it ever level? When was what ever level? And the answer is, it doesn't have to be level. If you're talking about the level playing field, the playing field definitely wasn't level for black people when slavery ended. It definitely was not level from the end of slavery up till civil rights. And even after civil rights, when the government tried to manufacture equality, they still failed to create a level playing field. And to this very day, is the playing field level? I would say it's as level as it's ever been. And this is the message that I always give to black people or any minority who considers themselves to be kind of behind the 8 ball, is that it is not the world's job to make things level or even or fair, quote unquote, for you. Life is not fair. So any of you who's waiting around for life to get fair for you to become successful, you can be waiting for a long time. Get yourself a Snickers bar. All right, that's not the way life works. Your job is to figure out what the playing field is, not what you want it to be, but what it is. Figure out how that game is being played. Develop your game so you can go out there and succeed anyway, regardless of the unfairness working against you, whatever you think it is. And then you got to go out there and perform and produce results, because we're in a performance and results-based business. That's the way life works. I didn't know if this was news to any of you, but this is the way it works. So if you're waiting for the playing field to be level, you're going to die waiting. That's not the way life works. Talking Biz says, sounds good, but we know it don't work like that. What are you referring to? We're at 75,000 likes. LT said, a scale tipping in either direction in favor of another person is unfair to the other. Exactly. That's right. Spummy Bum said, that's not DEI. Anytime I talk about DEI, someone comes in and tries to split hairs about what DEI is. I think I gave a pretty good generalization of what it is. And I mean, you could talk for hours about what DEI is and isn't. We're not doing that here. Juan said, what if the best are all black? Juan, have you ever watched the NBA or the NFL? There you go. The best are all black, and that's why all the players are black. If you're thinking of another industry where all the best people are black, but they don't have the jobs, they don't have the positions, please tell me what and where and what industry that is. Because if I'm a white man, let's say I'm a white man, and I really don't have a favorable opinion of black people, but my main thing is not hating black people. My main thing is making money. Guess what? If the best people to help me make the most money are black, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna hire a bunch of black people. If my thing is making money, and if you run a business, your main thing is making money. Your main thing is not giving a preference to a race. Your main thing is, how do I make the money? You will hire black people if there are black people who are qualified to do the job. That's the way it works. Look at Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness, which was based on a true story. When that guy got to the job interview, finally at the end, there's a bunch of white guys in suits looking at him like, all right, this guy doesn't look like the normal guy we hire, but he impressed them enough in that interview. They hired him, and he became a good worker. And that was based on a true story. I'm not saying that because it's not the movie. That was based on a real story. That guy really existed. Spummy said, DEI gives opportunity to minority groups not being forced to hire them. Yeah, it sounds good, Spummy Bum. That's the corporate brochure definition of DEI. We know. No, so you're not telling us anything new. Josh said, not even close. It gives people the chance. Yeah, we know. Again, all y'all saying the same thing about DEI. Benji Mary said DEI was a choice, not a mandate. Well, it depends on where are we talking about. It was a choice where. And it was some places it was a mandate. It was not a choice everywhere. Juan said, wearing a suit doesn't make you right. Here we go. So what do we want to call this one? Wearing a suit doesn't make you right is it's kind of a straw man, but we would actually call this an ad hominem. So I think we gotta come up with another award. Moderators, we're gonna call this the ad hominem of the day because this one gets used so often. So Juan, congratulations. You get the initial, the first ever ad hominem of the day, which is when somebody says just because you're wearing a suit does not make you right. Now, somebody says that like every day. So Juan, you get the award. So now we have an official title for what you just did. And Juan, you know what? I actually agree with you. Wearing a suit does not make me right. The fact that I know what the fuck I'm talking about makes me right. And the fact that you are in the comments but not doing your own live stream saying what is right as opposed to me is what makes you wrong. I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, I'm not. Benji said, no one was forcing you to engage in DEI policies. Well, me, personally, you're talking, well, Benji, what you need to understand is there are corporations in the United States of America that get tax breaks and they get benefits from the government. And if the government says you must enforce these DEI policies or you got to have a certain score, what was the name of that organization that had the score, the corporate responsibility score that was based in DEI stuff? If your score is not high enough, you can't get these tax breaks or you're not going to get this money from us. That is basically a mandate. It's a mandate without calling it a mandate. So yes, there was mandates. There were forces of DEI policies. So what you're saying is incorrect. Bree said, you realize hiring managers are more likely to hire those who look like them unknowingly. Well, everybody has the unconscious bias of tilting towards people who look like them. At the same time, Bree, in a performance-based business, we're going to pick the people who can best help us win. Who owns all the NBA and NFL teams? They're all white. I don't think there's a single black majority owner in the NBA or NFL, yet all the players are black. All the best players are black. So explain that one. And I know the NBA and the NFL is a small percentage of people, but the best performers end up in the best spots. That's how life works out. That's generally how it works. I don't understand. Anytime I talk about DEI, a whole bunch of black people come in here and try to argue and say that you're all alluding to the fact that some high-level black performer is not getting an opportunity. Please tell me who they are and where are they not getting an opportunity. Name the person. That's what I want to know. Let's not even talk in generalities. Name this high-level black performer who's not getting an opportunity because they're black. Give me their name. If it's you, say you. And tell me what industry you work in. And articulate how you're not getting an opportunity. That's what I want to know. Mr. Flex said Trump's all hires were DEI. Oh, that's old. We know. We've heard that already. Eric said, bro sold out to MAGA. If I sold out to MAGA, please show me where the money's at because I didn't get it. But Heck said, thank you from someone who almost lost their job through DEI. All right, so I see DEI is a hot topic for a lot of people. Josh says, is being a Trump swallower come with knee pads at a separate gifted purchase? All right, we got to give that. That's the ad hominem of the day, number 2. Congrats, Josh C. Mr. Flex said, you're confused. Are you a lawyer or a first grade teacher? It's a false binary. Franchise said, what about nepotism? What about it? Nepotism was what's supposed to happen. All right. You, as a parent, you put yourself in a good position, then you help your kids get into a better position simply because you're their parent. That's what nepotism means. Donald Trump's done it. LeBron James did it. All right. Everybody should do nepotism. Any of you who has kids, you should engage in nepotism. And if your parents weren't able to engage in nepotism because they didn't have the power or position to help you, then you should fix that and make sure you don't have the same problem with your kids. That's how I feel about nepotism. Eric said, yeah, I mean, as long as you're a Trump kid. No, there's a whole bunch of black people who have benefited from their parents helping them out too. They're not all famous. Trump is famous. LeBron James famous. But there's a bunch of people who are not famous who are able to practice nepotism on their own kids. What you should ask is if your kids can benefit from nepotism. And if your kids can't, that's what you should be focused on. Angel I said, you get a chance by applying. If it wasn't what he says, you would need DEI. I'm not quite sure I understand what you're saying there. Spummy said, everyone had the opportunity to join, and that's literally DEI. Every opportunity to join what? Talking about a fraternity or sorority? Everybody's not in one. what makes it exclusive, yeah, there's an opportunity. For example, if I go to Alabama University and I go to the football offices and say, when's football tryouts? I want to walk on. They're going to tell me when I can come. There's an opportunity. Everybody can try out. Is everybody going to make the team? No. The fact that not everybody makes the team is what makes it exclusive. So no, you don't. There's no DEI in sports. That's the reason why sports is what it is. Not everybody can get in. Jim said there was a time when American business needed to be forced to be more inclusive. That time has passed. Yes, exactly. Exactly. There was a time when people were denied just because you're black, you can't even get a chance. In 2025, that's not the case. Susie said America has gotten so soft. Yes, it has. Mariah said DEI requirements before were so low, like one minority for companies to qualify as DEI forward. Well, in some cases, that's true. I'm going to take your word on it, Mariah. But anyway, in context, what does it have to do with what I've said, big picture on DEI? Renee said, need a list of those men so I can stay the hell away from them. Which men are you talking about? TD says, and this is why we got stars claiming there's a moratorium in the industry. Which industry? Britt said, had to be quick. Oh, well, people poke and go. There's 40 minutes in a day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how exactly? I don't know what the requirements were. I had to read up on it. It's probably like 60 seconds. All right, 60 seconds in the vagina, get out. All right, that counts. Next one, 60 seconds, you get out. Next. That's probably how it went. I'm assuming. Lawrence McKinnis, good morning. Marky Man said, tattered and torn is not as valuable. Correct. Jim said, you do know only a person of color is allowed to say what you're saying, right? Exclusive club. Allowed? Who gave me the what's the word? The word is escaping me. Who gave me permission to say what I'm saying? Nobody. I grant myself permission. Jim, I'm assuming maybe you're a white person. Nobody's blocking you from saying it. Now, you may get more blowback for saying what I'm saying. I think that's what you're alluding to. But just because you get blowback doesn't mean you can't do it. Robert said, we white men are not oppressed. Okay. I'm not white, so I'll take your word for it. D said, yeah, dude, the recency of it is incredibly relevant in our society and culture. Still, go touch grass. The recency of what? What are you referring to? Some of you give me these its and he's and theys, and I don't know what you're talking about. Ramsell said, this is a poor argument since many, if not most other groups have been compensated for injustices. What's a poor argument? Jim said, when everyone can say what you're saying, regardless of color, that's when we will be inclusive. Well, Jim, who tells you what you can and can't say? Last I checked, in America, we have free speech. That's the First Amendment. Do you not have access to the First Amendment? What are you talking about, Jim? Sounds like you may have a testicular problem more than a permission problem. All due respect. I'm okay said, I ain't no fortunate one, song by Creedence Clearwater back in the 60s. Why are you bringing that up? Spin, good morning. My crazy said they don't believe it. It just gives an excuse to act on how they feel. Well, that's most human beings. I don't even know what you're talking about, but that applies to all humans. But heck yeah, I remember that quote by Morgan Freeman. Ed Two Toes, good morning. Blossom said some lawsuit cast tremendous doubt on him. Who's him? You gotta be careful with these pronouns. I don't know what you're referring to by the time I get to your comments. I'm okay said we need term limits for Supreme Court justices. I would agree with term limits to pretty much every position in the government. I like that idea. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetimes, but I like the idea. Marlene said merit means people will actually learn something in school. It depends on what school you go to and who's teaching. That's what I would say. I think you got to be more specific. Mikey said people should be able to hire who they want. It's their business. I agree. The thing is, you can hire who you want in your business, but if you start taking money from the government, now the government has a say. And someone gives you money, they have a say in what you do. That's how it works. So that's how the government was able to enforce or strongly advise on DEI policy, because they're saying, look, we're giving you a tax break. You want to keep this tax break. Here's what your org chart needs to look like. That's generally how they did it. Now, I'm not being super specific, but that's how they did it. And you can hire who you want in your business. Now, let's say I have a private business. I'm not taking any government money, so they can't tell me who to hire. And I only want to hire men. But with the job that I'm trying to get done, the money that I want to make, I realize that hiring a woman will probably put me in a better position to make that money. And I'm in business to make money. I will hire the woman. Why? Because I'm in the money business. I'm not in the man business. So this is what y'all need to understand. If you go into an industry or a business that is about a performance and they're clear about that, then the best performers will get chosen. Now, the others of you, if you work in academia or corporate, which are not about performance, they are about politics. They're about keep your job, don't get fired, and do what's safe. Then yes, you're going to get the shenanigans. Why? Because you're in an industry that is designed around shenanigans. Any of you who believes you're a high level performer and you want to get a higher opportunity based on your level of performance and skill set, go somewhere where performance is the only thing that matters, which means you got to step out of the safety bubble of academia and corporate and the government, which are all high level bureaucracies. Go find out if you're good as you say you are. Because if you're as good as you say you are, you can go into the open marketplace and prove it. I'll tell you that again, nothing that I'm telling you here is a new argument. The work on your game commandments, the 12 work on your game commandments. These are the commandments of what work on your game is all about. And I'm going to open this and tell you. Number 7, commandment number 7, marketplace results. If you are as good as you say you are, you can go into the open marketplace and prove it. No excuses. Now, if you're in a corporate space and you have a title, you got that title because you played the political game. Corporate is about politics. It's not about performance. Academia is about politics. The government is about politics. Private businesses are about performance. Because if a private business does not perform, they go out of business. If you don't perform in the government, you can go $36 trillion in debt and still be operating and everybody's still getting their check. That's not a performance-based business. Do y'all understand this? So any of you who's not in a performance-based industry or working at a performance-based company, don't tell me about how DEI is necessary. You don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't know because you haven't lived it. You can't live in the zoo and talk about what it's like to live in the jungle. All right, see you later, Soul Art New York. Ed said, what about our history with the Moors? What about it? What does it have to do with this? Mikey said, can't blame the system, though. You got to blame the person who took the money over a man. Yes, I think it's both. The system incentivized it, and then the people took it. But if I had to pick one, I'm picking the person. Birdman said, my God, man, keep up the good work spreading knowledge. Maybe some will absorb it. Yeah, some will, some won't. As they say in sales, some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting next. Liz said, why would you want to be hired due to how you identify? Do people have no shame? Well, people got bills to pay, Liz. That's why. People got bills. User said, what is a straw man? I think I explained it. Straw man is when you take something that somebody said, you reframe it into something they didn't say, i.e. a straw man, and then you beat up the straw man. It's much easier to beat up a straw man than it is to beat up an actual man, because an actual man will hit you back. A straw man doesn't punch back. So that's the general concept of a straw man. You just make up something that you can beat up very easily because it can't fight back because it never actually existed. Dally Matt, appreciate you. User said, loving the information. Thank you. Animal said, I don't think I've seen 2 straw men in your life that quick. It was the first 2 comments that I said was straw man. Sometimes it happens. Dally Mac said, voting one way at a 90% clip is crazy work, and then you get ridiculed for thinking different. That's pretty much what happens if a black person comes out and they either say that they're going to vote Republican or say that they support Trump, or even me. I've never claimed to have voted anything or voted for anybody ever, but people come in here and they accuse me of being MAGA, accuse me of being a Trump supporter just because I have some ideas that go against the grain of what they've been conditioned to think. Candy said, my race is irrelevant, but I vote for the best candidate regardless of their party, which is how we hope everybody does. And most people, I think if you ask most people, is that how they vote? They would all say yes, but we know that most of them are lying. Jan says, Supreme Court sways whichever way throws up the higher bribe. Man, I don't know about that. you gotta present some proof for that. CG said, what personal development book would you recommend today? You mean besides my book called The Third Day, The Decision That Separates the Pros from the Amateurs? What's your subject or area of interest, CG? Give me a little bit more information. I'll give you a good suggestion. Jansen said, name another president that ignored the 4th and 14th Amendment. That's called a Socratic trap, what you just did there. That's not the topic here today, and you're asking me a question to put me in some type of box that you want to talk about. You got to do that on your live stream. Animal said, do you like Scott Bessent? I don't know much about him. Slick Vic said, none of the former presidents had 34 felony convictions except for Trump. So, And Trump get 2 terms just like a whole bunch of them did. So I mean, what do you want? What do you want to happen here? Tom Burr said Ben Carson is a great example. Yes, and Ben Carson's famous too. There's a whole bunch of black people who are great examples who are not famous. User said, can you explain manufactured equality? Manufactured equality is, let's just say, let's use an example like the New York Knicks. New York Knicks are a good basketball team. They're in the NBA, which has the top 1% of basketball players in the world. Manufactured equality would be like if the New York Knicks say, you know what, we need more equality or more equity on our basketball team. So that means we got to get some girls on the team. We got to get some Asians on the team. We got to get some white guys on the team. And we got to get some gay guys on the team. So what they do is they take half the roster. Let's say that's 6 people. Let's take 6 of these black guys who earned their way onto the roster, kick them off, and we're going to replace them with 2 girls, 2 white guys, and 2 gay guys, or maybe 2 Asians. Now we have more equality. So we manufactured equality on our roster. They done it. They did it. They checked the box. Everybody can celebrate it. The problem is when they go onto the court to play in the games next season, the New York Knicks are going to be getting their asses kicked because the players they have on the roster are not good players. They're not high-level performers. So even though you created equality, the problem is you hurt your performance. So your performance suffers when you focus on equality. That's why I said you cannot prioritize 2 things at the same time. You prioritize performance, you're going to get the best performers. If they happen to be a homogenic group, so what? If I say I want the best basketball players and they all end up being black guys, did I do something wrong? No. If I say I want the best internet coders and they all happen to be white guy internet geeks, does that mean I did something wrong? Because I don't have any girls or I don't have any 6'9" guys. Does that mean I did something wrong? No, I'm prioritizing the performance. When you prioritize performance, you naturally get diversity of skill set, not diversity of color. The main diversity you need is diversity of skills. The New York Knicks have a diversity of skills. They got guys who can dribble, guys who can shoot, guys who can play defense. You got big guys who stand around the basket and can dunk. You have a diversity of skill sets, not a diversity of color. Diversity of color means absolutely nothing. You need diversity of performance. So in a business, if you're running a Walmart, you got people who know how to work the register, people who can put stuff on the shelf. You got the managers. You got somebody in the floral department, somebody in the produce department, somebody in the customer service department. You got security guards. You got somebody in the back in the clothes section folding the clothes. You got people in the back watching the inventory. And you got somebody, bringing the shopping carts back to the little bays of shopping carts as people leave their carts next to the parking spots. You have a diversity of skills. That's how you run a business, not diversity of color. What we need an Asian person for? What's different than having an Asian person or a black person bringing the shopping carts back into the store? What does it matter? It doesn't matter. That's why diversity of color makes no sense whatsoever, especially in 2025. When you diversify skill sets, that's when you win. When you try to diversify color, then you're setting yourself up to lose because you're not going to have the best players by definition. Again, you can't prioritize 2 things at once. So you have to pick one. The G report said DEI is garbage. Yes, it is. Jansen said, we're not doing that here. I don't have a good enough argument. What was the question that I said that to? If you ask something that's not the topic, then of course we're not going to do it. But tell me what the topic was when I said that. Animal said, I work at a Ford plant. I can confirm. LOL. Yeah, pretty much. Margaret, good morning. Someone said, trying to be white passing. Really? Margaret said, the thing about business is you got to keep your feelings out of it and do what you have to do. Well, every human has feelings, so I don't think it's possible to do that all the time. Some people are better at it than others. Let's see. Can we get to 90,000 likes, please, on TikTok? Let's see. Is this for subscribers only? No. EIG, yes. Was it the EIG? I remember it was something like that. Or ESG, it was something like that. Yeah, I think you're on the right track, Dally Matt. My Crazy Life said Boeing definitely did DEI and basically put people in jobs they were not qualified for. A lot of companies did it. The thing is, the way business is set up these days is that many businesses are so set, especially corporations, that even if you put unqualified people in certain positions, the ramifications of that are so small or so far downstream that people don't even connect it to. So you can get away with it pretty much. If you do that, you do DEI on the New York Knicks, the results will be obvious very quickly. You do DEI in a corporation, the results will not be obvious, maybe at all. That's the difference. Dami Ray said, thank you for being a free thinker. You're welcome. Margaret said, white or black or brown, if you do your job and you're the best at it, then the best person gets it. Yes, today that is true. It has not always been true, so I understand the argument against it. Fine Weinstein said, wow, you really got them upset today. Well, it depends on the topic. When the topic is race, that tends to get people upset. Monarch said, I don't understand what your point is. I am anti-DEI who believes in merits. What do you not understand? Have you heard the entire conversation, or did you come in the middle? If you came in the middle, then it makes sense that you don't understand. Lauren Soul Food said, love the comeback in education. Well, me too. Thank you. That's why I read these comments. Wolfru Nian said, nepotism is much worse than DEI. No, it's not. Nepotism is not a bad thing. Nepotism just means helping out people who are kin to you because they're kin to you, which is actually all of our responsibilities, in case any of you didn't know. If you are a parent listening to this, it is your responsibility to practice nepotism, to help your kids out and put them in a better position than you were in because they're your kids. You're supposed to do that. That's not a bad thing. DEI is manufactured, was created out of nowhere. Nepotism was not created out of nowhere. If you saw two kids sliding off the edge of a cliff and you got only one free hand, you can only save one. One of them is your kid and the other one's not your kid. Which one you going to save? You going to save your kid or let the other one drown? Why? Because it's your kid. That's nepotism. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with nepotism. And everybody should practice nepotism. Again, you should help your own out. Absolutely. At least your family out. When it comes to performance, though, you got to pick the best people. Psych Nurse, good morning. Kleck said, love your work, bro. People are brainwashed. Pretty much. Painter said, am I live on YouTube? Yes, I am live on YouTube. Go to workonyourgame.live. That's the link in my profile. You'll see my YouTube link, and you'll see these lives on YouTube. The replay will be on YouTube as well. Monarch said, absolutely. Most people don't have the courage to speak their minds. You do, admirable. Well, thank you. See, I don't work in the bureaucracy, so I can say whatever I want. Michelle, good morning. I'm okay. So I had to choose brains over beauty. I would choose quality over quantity. In what context? Twillis said, I am absorbing this knowledge. Thank you. Mag and Nikki said, it's called ignorance. What are you referring to? Someone said, Ben Carson's the GOAT. Mag and Nikki. Painter said, that's exactly how I vote. Cosmically Poor said, what you want to happen here, accountability and holding the baggage of one's choices. Well, that's always what happens. Mariah said, no business does this. Does what? Y'all got to give me context when you're responding to the things that I'm saying, because I'm reading the comments from oldest to newest. Britt said, I want to be on the Mavericks. Yeah, they did diversity. That's what they would do. Cosmically said, equity is what people should focus on. Equity is what America arrives for, the potential approval. I'm not a fan of equity. Equity is about, I did a whole podcast episode on this concept, equity versus equality. And equality is about treating everyone fairly. Equity is about people getting the same outcomes. And that's impossible. It's humanly impossible to manufacture equal outcomes. Even equal opportunity is impossible to manufacture. Because what if my parents were rich and they have $1 billion and your parents are broke, they have no money? We ain't got the same opportunities. I got a lot more than you got. And what you going to do about that? Is the government going to give you $1 billion to make it equitable? No, you can't do that. You cannot manufacture equal outcomes or equal opportunities. It's not possible. Mariah says, but did you even give the others a chance or overlook them because they are not black males? Well, the way the sports world works, Mariah, is that you get yourself visible by what you do at the previous levels. So, yes, you can be overlooked. You can be overlooked because you haven't done anything to get looked at in the first place. That's the way business works. You want to get known in business. It's not your job to just sit there and hope somebody comes and finds you. It's your job to go out and do things that make people who can help you know that you exist. That is your job. That's called marketing. When you're an entrepreneur, that is 90% of the job is marketing. Letting people know that you exist and that you have something that they want. If you don't do that, it is not everyone else's fault that they haven't recognized you. It's your fault because you haven't done anything to get recognized. That's the way business works. Cosmically said, DEI is not garbage. See above regarding equity. Equity is Americans who give all a chance. Yes, it is garbage, and that is not what American is. Cosmic Poor is not American to give everybody a chance. Everybody has a chance. We have freedom in America. This is the freest nation in the world. We have freedom here. So DEI is garbage, and equity is a nonsense concept, which is humanly impossible to achieve. And you have an opportunity just by being alive in a free country. You can do whatever you want. Now, what you do with it is a different story. Jim said, I'm white, but if we say what you're saying, we'd be shunned or fired. Well, see, here's the fundamental difference between me and you, Jim, is that I don't have a boss. I can say whatever I want because nobody can tell me what to do. You have a boss, so you can't say what you want. So I understand your problem, but it ain't my problem. That's your problem. So if you had the balls that I have, you could quit your job, start your own business, and you can say whatever you want. So you can come meet me here. But I'm not going to meet you where you are. You got to come meet me where I'm at. Sweet Willie said, I work at Target. As a company, they stick their foot in the mouths on any pro DEI. Yeah, I've heard about that. Yes, ESG. That's what I thought it was. ESG, environmental, social, and governments. Yes, I've read about that. We're at 92,000 likes, folks. Can we get 8,000 more? Can we get to 10,000? Mayan contractor says 74% of illegals send their paycheck back to their family to their low economic country. I've heard people talking about that a lot of the money doesn't go to the government, it goes right back out of the country. Doc said it's hard to legislate out someone hiring based on race or gender. Yeah, it's generally very difficult. That's why you got to put the rules in place, and then you got to trust that people are going to do it, and then you get lawsuits, and that's why we get these lawsuits. Because if someone says you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then they got to take it to court, and then you got to prove it. And it takes a long time to prove this stuff, and a lot of people just say it's not even worth the effort or the resources. Cosmically said, nepotism is literally your family. It isn't the best choice for the business, but you choose them. Well, it depends. Sometimes the best choice for the business is your family. It depends on how you're running your business. If I'm running my business, you can't tell me what the best choice for my business is because it's my business. I make the final decision. So who are you to tell me what the best choice for my business is? The answer is you are no one. You can't tell me that. I make that decision because I'm the one who put the money on the table and took the risk in starting this business. So all final decisions get made by me. That's the great thing about owning a business. Now, when you work at a job, you got to do what the job tells you to do. When you own your business, you do what you want to do, whether you end up right or wrong. The woman's name was Ames, A-M-E-S, and she got a ruling from the Supreme Court. So what happens next, I'm assuming they may have to go back to court. And now the burden of proof is not there that the lower courts try to give. So now they have to rule on her case in a more fair way. So I'm assuming that's what happens next. Pioc says, you have limited understanding of history. Your view of nepotism and DEI maintains the racial wealth gap. Well, there's always been a racial wealth gap. And you said, just because there's a racial wealth gap doesn't mean we need DEI. DEI is not closing a wealth gap. People bring up the racial wealth gap as if that's something that is supposed to be manufactured to be fixed. That's not the way it gets fixed. And it's not even, I don't even consider it to be broken as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it's broken. Brandywine said, Nepo kids have it harder because peers don't want them, and I've seen them work harder to prove their worth. Well, that's kind of subjective. I get what you're saying, though. Rachel said, you have to sell yourself and your value. That's right. We're at 94,000 likes, folks. Can we get to 100K, please? Pioc, stop putting the same comment here. We have to kick you out. Don't spam my comments with the same one over and over again. Dolly Mack said, what's crazy is we have a world of knowledge at our fingertips and social. Yeah, so well, people got to choose to access it. That's the problem. These comments are coming very quickly right now. I'm not reading every single comment, folks. I'm just reading the ones I can catch. Painter said, knocking on doors got to get your name out to stay busy in business. Yes, you do. You got to do something. Daniel said, just because the NBA is mostly black doesn't make it biased. Well, it is biased. It's not biased based on race. It's biased based on performance. So, yes, the NBA is biased. Any industry that is about performance or is performance-based is biased. It's biased towards performance, not color. That's the part that people misconstrue. The modeling industry is biased towards people who are pretty. Now, you don't see a bunch of ugly, fat people in the modeling industry. You see a bunch of skinny, pretty people. It is biased. It's biased for the right type of people, for the type of performance that they want based on what they want to sell. The Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, they had a couple years looking crazy, but now they went back to being biased towards what? A bunch of pretty, skinny girls who look good in bikinis. That's what it's supposed to be because that's what they're selling, and that's what their audience wants. When they start putting fat girls on there and old people on there, they stop selling magazines. They said, oh, we got to fix this. We ain't selling no magazines. Let's go back to putting the skinny, pretty girls who look good in thongs. Let's put them back on there because this is what sells. Because they're in the business of selling magazines. You're in the business of winning basketball games. You got to pick the best players. If they happen to be black, so what? We're biased towards the best players. If you want to be on the team, you got to be one of the best players. I don't care what color you are. If I own the New York Knicks and a bunch of Asian guys are the best players, I'm going to have a roster full of Asian guys. And if if all the best players are black, I'm going to have a bunch of black guys. That's the way business works. So Rick J said, do you really believe, sounds like a straw man is coming, but let's see. Rick J said, do you really believe that we all have equal opportunities? ? I will win regardless, but not are equal. Do I really believe that we all have equal? Okay, this is not quite a straw man. Okay, so Rick J, you dodged getting the straw man award. Do I really believe we all have equal opportunities? I believe we have equal opportunity, singular. Yes, we do have equal opportunity. You have equal opportunity to be the best version of you. And because we are different, we come from different places with different backgrounds, different lineage, and we have different talents. My opportunity and your opportunity are not the same thing because we're different people. I'm 6'4" and athletic. I had opportunities to play sports. Now, if you're 5'5" and not athletic, in fact, you don't have the same opportunity in sports as I have because you don't have the same skill set that I have. So do we both have opportunity? Yes, but not the same opportunities. Do we have equal opportunity? Yes. Equal does not mean what I get is the same as what you get. Because again, I have an opportunity to go and be in an industry where I can make all this money in a short period of time, and your opportunities may only limit you to making $50,000 at a time. So we're not starting in the same place. Do you consider that equal? I say yes. Equal does not mean we get the same outcomes. Equal means I can do something. It means you can do something. It doesn't mean we get to do the same thing. This is where people conflate this concept of equality. Equality does not mean we all get the same thing. We're at 100K, folks. Appreciate it. Daniel said, having a pattern doesn't always mean bias. That's right. It depends on where the pattern comes from and why it exists. Dowie said, would that be appeal to emotion, the DEI argument, and the wealth gap? Somewhat. It depends on why they're bringing up the wealth gap. It depends. Jim, glad to have you here. Come back tomorrow. Sean said, racial wealth gap is a result of demographic habits, not disparity of the system. I think it's a combination of both. There was a time when black people weren't even having jobs. They were slaves and they weren't getting paid. But white people had jobs and they were getting paid. So there was definitely a head start for white people versus black people. We can't say that didn't happen. Now, to this day, that gap can continue because, it's not like white people stopped making money so black people could catch up. Now, at the same time, also, black people, when it comes to what we do habitually as a group with our money, does play a role in the fact that the gap is not closing. Does that play a role? Yes, it does. So it's a combination of both. I wouldn't say it's a one or the other thing. The racial wealth gap is a multivariate issue. I don't even consider it a problem. Again, I don't even want to call it a problem because a problem means that maybe somebody has caused it and there's some quote unquote fix. There's no fix to that. It's an issue, but it's a multivariate issue. So a lot of people try to talk about it as if it's like one or two things that caused it. It's 1,000 things that caused the wealth gap. And those 1,000 things are not all going to change all at the same time just because somebody waved a magic wand like abracadabra. All right, a couple more minutes here, folks. We got 7 more minutes, then we'll wrap this up. So, Jansen, you're trolling a little bit too much, so we got to get rid of you. You're free to disagree, but you start trolling my comments saying dumb shit just to get attention, and you got to go. So you try it, but you're going. So, what else do we got here today? While I'm waiting, I'll tell you all I do these live streams Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. Topic is always to be determined. We don't always know what the topic will be. Sometimes I talk about I always talk about a current event most of the time. Every once in a while, I'll do an evergreen subject like business or mindset or personal development, professional development. I do those every once in a while, but most of the time I do a current event. So we got a couple more things. I'm going to be looking at some things here today. I usually use X to find out what's going on. And then I base my material on that. So let me see. So I will tell you all while we are waiting that I'm going to see if there's any more comments come through. ThirdDayBook.com. Go to that link you see right there pinned on the screen on TikTok, ThirdDayBook.com. This book's free. Just covers shipping. Or go to the link in my profile, workonyourgame.live. It has links to all the books of mine you can get for free. We got a book called The Mirror of Motivation. Another one called The Sales Discipline System. You get access to my Dre GPT chatbot. You get access to our Circle group coaching membership program. It's only $97 a month. and my email list, Work on Your Game University. We got a lot of things going on, so you can find out about all of that stuff by going to the link in my profile here on TikTok. Again, I do these lives Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. And Doc said, instead of complaining about hiring practices, focus on self and make career moves. Yes, generally. I mean, if you got game, you're going to find a way to show your game. Art Decor said, do I have merch? I used to sell merch, but I don't really sell merch that much anymore. We might start selling hats again. You see my Work on Your Game hat up there. We got a bunch of hats, but I haven't even been selling those. So we might bring that back at some point, but it's not a priority, as we've been talking about here today. So Rise Soul, thank you for the follow. So I will see you all here tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. This replay will be on YouTube. So any of you want to see the replay of this, you can watch it on YouTube. The link to my YouTube is in my profile on TikTok. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm live on Instagram right now as well. And all the other socials, I'm on Facebook.com/Work on Your Game University. LinkedIn, just look up my name, Dre Baldwin. I'm on X at Dre All Day. X is the only app where I do active social media use. My only social media use is doing these lives. And then I'm on X. So if you want to engage with me textually, you can follow me on X at Dre All Day. That link is in my profile, not my profile, but on this page right here, workonyourgame.live. That's the link in my profile on TikTok. So if you want to follow me on X, you can do it through this page right here. The link will be in there. That's the only place on social media you will ever see me commenting or engaging in back and forth other than doing this right here. That's it. And that's the way I save time and I'm able to get things done. So I will see you all tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. Topic to be determined. Everybody have a great Thursday. We are out of here. Work on your game. Thank you to my moderators as well.